Hey everybody, we're in the green room for DisrupTV. We are not talking about ChatGPT or banking crises, but it is St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patrick's Day. We're going to go in reverse order. We're going to introduce everybody and really quickly tell us where you're coming in from and what you're talking about today. Jon Reed, what's going on?
Well, actually, we're going to talk about Silicon Valley Bank and the financial crisis, but you and I will argue about that for a minute, and then I'm going to tell you whether I think generative AI is overhyped, and the answer may surprise you.
Ooh, okay. We'll stay tuned. Melissa, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Hey there, Melissa Swift coming in from New York City. I am here to talk about my new book, Work Here Now, Think Like a Human and Build a Powerhouse Workplace, and how you can make work not suck. So I'm pretty excited for the conversation.
Oh, that's always an awesome topic. Very, very cool. And you might be seeing the future for us. Where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I'm dialing in from New Zealand. So it's bright and early in the morning. We're one day ahead so far in the future. So I'm going to be talking today about the new talent economy. There's nothing like a banking crisis to foster a conversation around a new talent economy. So, yep, Silicon Valley banks. First and foremost, up on the topic.
Very, very hot topic.
So we're going to move beyond that one.
No, not at all. Hey, and we're joined with our awesome producer, Elle, my co-founder, co-host, Vala, and of course, Elle, do the honors.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. Selling Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Ray's a regular television business and tech contributor on Fox Business, Finance, Bloomberg, CNBC. Turn on a T-Day, including weekends, and you'll find Ray. In my opinion, he's one of the top viewers to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm with Vala Afshar, the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence, and executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational, insightful tweets when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce. You can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg, posting insightful analyses of this show like ZDNet, and maybe writing a future book. So who do we have here to kick off our awesome show? As we know, it's about our guests. It's not about us. And who starts?
Ray, the best and brightest CEOs come on DisrupTV, and there's no exception here. And Fulton is the founder CEO of Fuel 50. Fuel 50 is an AI-driven talent marketplace platform that fuels internal talent mobility, workforce agility, employee engagement, talent retention, and bottom line impact within leading organizations all around the world. Anne is recognized as a talent futurist. She has grown the Fuel 50 to more than 100 Fuelies. I love that. Raised more than $36 million and supported world-class brands like CVS, John Deere, United Nations, Coca-Cola, Fidelity, countless more. Anne is the author of the Career Engagement Game, Shaping Careers for an Agile Workplace, and has worked for 20 years, started when she was 15, as an organizational psychologist. You can follow Anne on Twitter at ANNE_Fuel50, FUEL50. Welcome, Anne, to DisrupTV.
Oh, great to be on the show today. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here, right? You're kind of taking a look at what's happening in the world economy, and that kind of drives future employment trends, future work trends, what's actually happening in that space. Tell us a little bit what you're seeing from your side of the world, and of course, the rest of the world as well.
I mean, I think, well, it's been an absolutely incredible roller coaster week. I mean, we said we weren't going to talk about it, but honestly, SVB,
Oh, we're just kidding.
so a signature, and being a technology company right now with 130 folk around the world, it was an interesting week. We can't say that we weren't impacted. Not a lot of sleep last weekend, but however, we've come back. Nothing like a treasury announcement to support a bank and. A buyout for £1 in the UK of HSBC. That was all very helpful for our global operations. Here we are, another week to survive the tail. But I think the reality is that, we're all facing a new economy regardless, right? There's all sorts of predictions out there as to what we're going to be weathering in the year ahead.
It's just a realization for me now that we're speaking to a startup CEO who had a very a roller coaster, I'm sure, a week of emotions and angst and anticipation. Can you talk about, what you were trying to? How did you get the 135 Fuelies to stay calm, stay focused on the customer, stay focused on the jobs to be done? It must have been quite a week of communicating with clients and employees and partners. Can you take us through this? And we don't have to talk a lot about it, but this whole journey of what happened in the last week or so.
Yeah, absolute roller coaster, right? First up, and most of it was at the weekend. So
that was the brutal part. Yeah. So, I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah. Friday afternoon, we're like, oh dear, and like everyone else, let's see where we can protect our money. I mean, we were in transition of moving banks anyway, so we were very, very, very fortunate and minorly impacted, but enough that we had to consider, customer payments, where were they going to pay us, because it's our bank of record, wages, how are we going to meet payroll. In certain geographies where Silicon Valley Bank was involved, and so it was just watching every announcement, putting into place multiple backup strategies, remaining agile. That's one of our business thesis is workforce agility, and wow, we had to be super agile. But we were ready, and I think there's been some amazing things that have actually now come into place to secure the future of the business. So there's the Treasury announcement that's super helpful, FDIC, and then HSBC buyout in the UK. All of those things giving us good confidence and assurance. But putting in place an insured cash sweep now means that all dollars in the bank are absolutely insured and protected. So we're in better shape than we were last Friday.
Yeah, happy to hear that. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, it's definitely there, right? And it also speaks to that notion of that we don't necessarily have the right talent in the right place. When you take a look at the SVB scenario, I mean, the management team was pretty unprepared for anything like this. If you look at the board, none of those folks had any banking experience. I mean, it was pretty rough. And I mean, you're thinking a bank in Silicon Valley can't find the right expertise. What can a normal company do, or even a startup do, right? So what are you seeing in that market? Like, where's talent management headed? What are people doing in that space?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's the reality is organizations, need agility more than ever. So, this is why, we're really anticipating that we need a new talent economy. And this has been coming at us since the pandemic, where we've seen, huge catch cries for change. And, the macro trends driving this new talent economy are here to stay. So, we've got the workforce demographics, we've still got baby boomers retiring and not enough folk entering the workforce. So we regardless of what's happening economically, we still have a talent crisis, talent shortage. So organizations have really got to prepare their workforce for the future. I also think there's a new social contract now at work, right? And I think it's a bit like, your book, Ray, you and I are writing on the same thing. There's new expectations in the workforce. There's new power plays coming. And this has been here for a while. It's been driven by the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter. The employee voice is really ascendant. It's important. It cannot and should not be ignored. So, there's some of the things that we're seeing, that are increasing the catch cry for this new talent economy.
You mentioned the word agility, so important, adaptability, being able to understand both the macro and micro conditions surrounding your business, your community, your stakeholders, customers, employees, partners. You at Fuel 50 are using technologies like AI to create a talent marketplace that's based on informed insights. And given the last few months of the AI craze, and I think Jon, our final guest, founder of Diginomica, is going to talk about that. What are your thoughts about top strategic imperatives in this new talent economy when we see such incredible acceleration of certain technologies within, for example, AI, the generative AI movement that really brought everyone's attention to life in October of last year? The company was founded in 2015, OpenAI, but it was only a few months ago with a simple prompt that the world woke up to. Wow, look at this power that's at our fingertips. What does that mean in terms of impact on talent?
I think that AI has been in play in the talent arena for quite some time also, so since 2015. And if we're wanting to match people to opportunities, which is what we do, matching them to futures, to learning, to everything that they need to do to create their future, of course there's AI in play, right? But I think that we need to absolutely carefully use AI for good. And that's kind of in our business DNA, is that we're using, the AI to be applied for good. And, a friend of mine, Dr. Robin Erickson, wrote a great paper on the shades of AI, which I thought was hilarious and funny and also very, very valuable. And that shades of AI kind of talks about, how far do we go, down the AI spectrum to, to ensure that we're being fair and inclusive and transparent and all of those things that sometimes, the black box side of AI is not delivering. So the way that we think about it is that we've got to make sure that we're being very careful in the way that we're using AI. We've got the New York AI audit regulations coming in, which is nothing but good, we think, for our industry. So the way that we apply AI is very much in an assisted AI, so that it's helping people make great decisions about their future. So whether it's an employee, they use AI to create all their assets, their skills and their talents, scraped from LinkedIn, etc. But the employee is still in the driving seat, as is, the talent managers and organizations, because we need to prevent harm and bias and, any lack of fairness into talent decisions. It's so important. And
right.
Employees are not going to let us get away with it.
Right. At my company, we have an ethical and humane use of software chief executive who's responsible for making sure that anything that we add to our software goes through the proper vetting in terms of, is this for the betterment of society? Before the first line of code, even at the design stage, we go through that due diligence. With 135 Fuelies, and you being the CEO, how much time do you encourage all of the Fuelies to spend being more comfortable with machine learning, large language models, AI? Is there an expectation at the CEO level that all employees of Fuel 50 have some level of knowledge in terms of these new emerging technologies?
I think probably more at a macro level. I mean, that every employee needs to be learning, right? I mean, that's what we want, is that we want employees to be agile, to be reskilling, to making sure that they've got the right skills and capabilities and knowledge to help them, operate in both now and into the future. And employees are so hungry for that. So 74% of employees want to take ownership for their own learning and reskilling and whatever that might mean, right? Yeah. Not necessarily just about AI, but, understanding how ChatGPT is going to impact them and their jobs and what can we leverage in a really intelligent way. So, I think it's really important that organizations, even in this economy, are ensuring that they've got a learning organization, a self-sustaining organization that's driven by, from the bottom up, from the employees themselves, and just enable them. And that's where technology plays a beautiful part of the equation, right? If you enable every employee to understand what are the 5 smartest things that they can be investing their time in from a learning point of view, upskilling in that regard, getting validation from their peers around how they've upskilled, you've got this incredible talent intelligence happening across the organization that means that organization is going to be more resilient through whatever the economy throws at us.
That's very cool.
That's a really, really good point, right? And let's talk about that in the context of recruiting, retention, reskilling, maybe rebounding, getting people coming back, right? But where's that playing a role both in, the type of work people are focusing on, right? Especially in a world where we're going to see more and more AI augmenting humans or working side by side with humans. How do you see that? How do you see that model fit in each one of those areas?
Yeah, I think, I'm going to start with retention, right? Because, even though organizations are at the moment optimizing, right? Have I got the best fit people right now for my business needs? And are those people, committed and engaged? And do I want to retain those? So, I think it's really important that we start there. So retention is still the bottom line. Organizations want to keep their best. If we're getting into survival and thriving mode, we absolutely want our best people optimized. And I'm saying not optimized as in, right sizing the organization. I mean, optimized so that each and every individual is reskilling for the future and has got the right skills and assets at their fingertips to be able to do that really efficiently and powerfully, and not wait for something coming from the organization down. You should all learn this. I mean, it's got to be faster. It's got to be more targeted. It's got to be personalized to each and every employee across the organization. So that's how we see those two pieces fitting into the equation. Ray, love the rebounder, and yeah, we I think all organizations, Vala, I'm sure you're seeing it too. We welcome the rebounders, right? With open arms. It's like, oh my goodness, come back.
I mean, they're boomerang back. We'll take you, So,
yeah,
so other than having an awesome CEO, how does Fuel 50 recruit the best talent to turn them into Fuelies?
I think, fortunately for us, I mean, we're so mission driven, right? We are on a mission to create great futures for everyone around the world. So it's so mission driven. That's kind of contagious. So, I think, it started in the early days that, we've got this attraction, strategy, or not even strategy, it just exists across the business that people are wanting to come and join that mission. So we hear it time after time, and there's all sorts of reasons that people are bringing, to their work. But, so many of them talk about a career derailing moment that might have impacted somebody on their family. They never want to see that happen again. They now see this mission of being able to make a difference to the future of people. So, whether it's engineers that help us build out this product with beauty, and doing coding for good, not harm, as you were kind of saying,
right.
A few of our talent started out in the gaming industry, building an addiction for poker games, right? And so they love their work now, right? We can have an addictive product that's engaging and but it's doing good, not harm.
That's terrific. My final question to you, often when we get startup CEOs on the show, we know we have many startup CEOs that watch the show. What advice do you have for someone who has the aspirations like yourself of building a great company? Any lessons learned you can share that would hopefully help these CEOs stick to their mission and vision and purpose and build a successful company like yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think after the week that we've had, I'm just going, keep calm and keep going.
Keep calm and keep going. You know what? That is a superpower, especially at certainly the last week or so. That's
never
great
give
advice.
up. There's always solutions there. Chip away. So that would be, our learning is that, holding to the mission, holding the values. Do it the right way for you and your people, and you will get there. So. But yeah, I'm not into the give up camp ever.
No problem.
Keep calm this week. There's lots of those moments on the journey. It's a roller coaster.
Well, yeah, no, look, talent's fluid, business models are fluid, everything's very dynamic today, and I think the one thing that you can do, if you can take control of where you are with your talent and be able to do, actually bring them in, retain them, keep them excited, keep them focused on mission, I think everybody, will benefit, especially customers and, the whole ecosystem around you. So, but this has been great. Thank you so much. We're Ann Fulton, CEO of Fuel 50 with the Fuelies. You can follow him on Twitter at Ann_Fuel50. And thank you so much for spending your early morning with us on Saturday.
Thank you,
My
Ann.
pleasure. Happy
Cheers.
St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Thank you. It's always awesome to have guests on Saturday join Disrupt on Friday.
They're futurists.
Yes, yes. Our next guest is still Friday. Our next guest is Melissa Swift, leads transformation solutions for Mercer in US and Canada. Melissa is responsible for Mercer's efforts in the areas of workforce transformation, human resource transformation, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and workforce analytics. Melissa has helped build businesses in the ESG transformation space, including launching sustainability services and clean tech practices at Deloitte and conducting 2 landmark carbon credit derivatives trades at Deutsche Bank. Melissa is a recognized thought leader on the subject of future of work in the pandemic era. She has been quoted in all the media outlets you can imagine, all major media outlets. She's the author of Work Here Now, Think Like a Human and Build a Powerful Powerhouse Workplace. You can follow Melissa on Twitter. She must have been an early adopter. M.E. Swift, MESWIFT. Welcome, Melissa, to Disrupt TV.
And yeah, if you get a chance to unmute, that'll be great. We're so happy to have you here.
Hi, Melissa.
And welcome. Yes.
Wow, very, very excited to be here and more excited to be speaking.
Yes.
No problem at all. Hey, we're really excited to talk about your book. And one of the interesting things we noticed inside the book was really about work's monsters. And there are a lot of monsters, right? And so the one I think that actually a lot of people are challenged with is really the anxiety monster. Talk a little bit about the anxiety monster. Like, how does it manifest itself and how do we slay it? So
it's interesting. I'm a big fan of if you can't name the problem, you can't solve the problem. So when I started thinking about what goes wrong with work these days, I really did think about it. There's actually some monsters there, right? There's some gnarly stuff. So the work anxiety monster, it's basically that little voice in your head that says that, oh, people are slow, people are lazy. And it says to you, you're slow, you're lazy. And that little voice, it leads us to make bad decisions, right? We keep driving people sort of faster and harder. And we don't actually think about the ways that human beings get work done better. And we fill our days with activity that doesn't always tie to business outcomes, right? If we wonder kind of why are we all so overloaded? And there's all this great academic research that work actually has gotten harder over the last few decades. It's not just a feeling that we all have. Work has, in technical terms, intensified. We are doing more units of work per unit of time than we used to. And it's that anxiety monster voice in our head saying, you got to speed up and you're lazy. Everyone's lazy. And it's like we need cognitive behavioral therapy as organizations.
Wow. Did these monsters appear more frequently in a hybrid work environment? Are you more susceptible to seeing the boss baby customer monster or the anxiety monster? I want to learn more about that second monster. But do you think this notion of balancing work at home, especially if you're with family, with kids, with parents, with pets, and then going in the office and finding it less populated as in the past, so you don't have those random collisions with a mentor or a possible sponsor? So early in your career, you haven't found someone that can turbocharge your career or even put your mind at ease that these monsters aren't here to harm you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the hybrid environment kind of, it almost gave some quiet for those monsters to really yell, right? That to your point, if I'm a manager, I'm not seeing people working, right? And if I'm an unsophisticated, insecure manager in particular, right, my anxiety monster gets very loud at that moment. But similarly, if I'm an employee and I'm not feeling, totally secure, I'm not feeling that total psychological safety, that anxiety monster, again, it gets very loud, and that it encourages performative work. Let me send some emails. Let me schedule some more meetings. I got to show everyone what I'm doing, right? Let me move my mouse, right? So my light goes green instead of yellow. We've all been there. We've all done it. It's a thing. It's a thing. So yeah, in kind of the quiet of the hybrid environment. And I think your point about early in career workers is very well taken. because they don't have those cues to calm down their anxiety monster. They don't have that track record of, I know my way of working works. I know I can deliver results. They don't know that yet. And so again, that's a silence that anxiety monster can kind of yell into.
Melissa, why did you write the book? I mean, it seems like I can feel the passion in you describing portions of your book. So obviously this was something that you wanted to do, and I can see the deep commitment to it. Can you share with us why you wrote the book?
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny. It started out in my mind as a very different book pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it was going to be this funny, jokey tour through all the kooky stuff we do to try to fix work, right? Okay, agile sprints, open plan offices. It's so goofy and fun, right? And then the pandemic happened.
Yeah,
and I found myself in this very profound place of, I was leading 2 series of seminars on how to work during the pandemic. I did not have a clue how to work during the pandemic, right? And I'm like trying to teach my kindergarten, literally.
What, you didn't have experience in a once-in-a-lifetime event? What do you mean?
Right, and I'm like instructing the world with this voice of authority, right? So I had this moment of, I talk about in the book, my computer's sitting on this table and it's like gonna fall off the table. It's a hot mess. And so I had this epiphany about, number one, we need a language about what's going wrong at work. Because we all had this feeling, right? We could all, you remember that time, you could feel it so palpably, but we didn't have a language to talk about it. So I was like, number one, I got to establish the language to talk about what's
The
broken.
language is so amazing in this book.
Thank you. That was a very conscious thing about it. Again, if we can't name it, and it's not like, sort of 3rd grade level of naming, right? People aren't going to remember it. But then number two, the thing that clients, because I'm, on top of everything else, I'm a working consultant. Clients always ask me, where can I get started? Can you just give me some practical places to get started? So, the book's full of places to start. It's not, well, I've mapped out the whole journey and this is how it ends, because that would not necessarily be a credible claim. But it does give you 90 starting points.
That's awesome.
It does. And one of them that I'm really interested in is the workforce copy machine. What is the workforce copy machine, and why is it so funny, actually? So
it's, it's one of those things where I started thinking about why the term future of work sometimes gets on my nerves. And I was like, It's not the inherent concept. It's the fact that we never get there. And I started thinking about, especially as I was researching things like the history of human resources and all this stuff. And I'm kind of going, we seem to just kind of repeat the bad stuff over and over. And that's where I came up with this idea of the workforce copy machine. So it's things like, let's say you go to hire a person and they're like, okay, well, what rec are you going to clone? Okay, you just use the term clone, right? You're going to copy paste somebody from the past into the future, the job of the past into the future. Similarly, you think about how we reward leaders in organizations, and especially in publicly traded companies, we're not rewarding you for daring and risk-taking. We're rewarding you for consistency, right? Do not screw it up. And factors like that just kind of copy paste the past right onto the future. And they're structural things. We can get in there with our little wrenches and fix them, but we have to be aware of how those mechanisms basically keep us from ever getting to the future of work.
Your subtitle starts with "Think like a human." So can you shed some? How can we better think like humans, or make human-centric decisions about people for people?
Well, yeah, so some of it is, I think, being a bit humble about the constraints we're actually under. So there's a couple of different sets of constraints, right? Number one, and I'm sorry, this is going to be sacrilegious for this show, but technology doesn't always work perfectly.
We completely agree. We completely agree.
Come on.
No, but so actually what's kind and human-centric is to just have contingency plans for if your bright, shiny new technology doesn't work exactly right. Because what happens is humans end up kind of jumping in and filling those gaps. And those are some of the most stressful, overloaded moments in the modern workplace, when you, the person, is frantically trying to cover for a technology that didn't quite work. Another kind of vector of thinking like a human and making human-centric decisions is literally just thinking about human kind of like neuroscience and physiology. So for instance, there's great research out of Stanford that says that we're basically not that productive after about 50 or 55 hours a week. Our brains wear out. We can't work that way. Well, right. Wow. How many of us work so many more hours than that? And so really thinking about if that's your actual window of productivity, how do I get the right work into that window? Because, companies are paying people for, a full 30 or 40 excess hours sometime during which the person isn't actually producing anything. I think sleep's another great example, right? So we all fly around and we globetrot and we end up sleep deprived. And again, research, someone is being pointed to. I don't know.
It's red.
Right. So
I've never heard about this.
Being there's a point of sleep deprivation when it's the same as coming to work inebriated.
Yeah.
Right. So
I've heard about that. I've never experienced it, but from what I know, no, I was kidding.
Apparently it's a thing. Right. But so thinking about some of those kind of things where if we accept our human constraints and we say, okay, well, what do we do? And the good news is there are things we can do. So for instance, right, globalization has created a whole class of sleep deprived executives, but with more asynchronous work, you can get around some of that. You don't need to be in that meeting at 11 p.m., right, to catch up with another region because you're doing a true follow the sun, right? You're working asynchronously. And so there are ways to correct for all of this. Some of it's going to be unavoidable, but some of it's fixable. And I think that's part of what I wrote the book to dig into, what are all the little places we can fix so we don't have that dark sinking feeling of work not quite working.
Did you find anything that was surprising to you in the process of writing the book, perhaps even change your mind or your thesis on a particular aspect in the process of investigating and interviewing and writing the book?
Yeah, I think the most shocking thing I dug up was about performance management. And so performance management, we always think it kind of dates back to like the crumminess of the Industrial Revolution of like, okay, my machine turned out, 10 pieces of metal or whatever. It comes from slavery. The principles of modern day performance management date back to the management processes of absentee slaveholders, that it only became important what each person produces if you thought you owned that person. And once I saw that, and there's great research. It was these poor accounting researchers who were just trying to research the history of accounting and stumbled on kind of this nightmarish information. But it's very well documented by the researchers. And once I saw that, you can't unsee it. And it makes sense. Like when our Mercer researchers have done a ton of research about performance management, there's always like glitchy stuff. And it's not always like demographic discrimination or something like that. Sometimes it's like how long your manager has been with the organization, right, affects your performance score. There's always noise in the equation. And once I saw that research about the history, I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. Of course it doesn't work. It comes from slavery. What a crummy practice.
Wow. So the big shock was we have broken performance management frameworks at all companies. So okay, what do we do? You're challenging dominant logic that's been in place for hundreds of years.
Right. What do we replace it with critically?
No.
Right? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to get smushier, right? Because that gets worse, especially from like a DEI perspective. The smushier it gets, the more unfair it's going to get. That's the wrong direction. So I think what's interesting is a lot of organizations are trying to move back toward mapping collective business outcomes by teams and really looking at that. And I think that's a bit of the unlock of what is the team able to accomplish rather than what is your individual performance. In some ways, it's answering a different question, but I'm very encouraged by that trend because the outcomes of the team, those tie to the business results. Sure. And that's the connection in a lot of cases that we've lost.
Wow.
Yeah, no, we definitely see that. And I mean, and there's different types of the way we look at work and organize work is going to change because of how we actually work with machines as well, right? And that augmentation, like you may be interacting with a bot. My bot might be talking to your bot, right? We might be in a room of like different types of mixed mode environments. And the thing that struck me in your book here is really couples counseling for humans and technology. Mm-hmm. This may be real, right? Maybe I may have to sit in with a performance review with me and my bot.
If you think about it, a lot of humans
will be like, hey, the human's underperforming again. What are we going to do?
I mean, you joke, but a lot of humans are managed by bots already, right? If you drive an Uber, you are algorithmically managed, right? You work in a
Yes, you are.
warehouse, you are
Yes, you
often
are.
algorithmically managed, right?
Yep.
So it's a very interesting, this idea of couples counseling for humans and technology, because it really, we have to be consciously thinking, and I think this is something that you guys spend a lot of time kind of thinking about, how do we actually navigate that relationship between humans and technology? So, I don't want to be horrible about it, so the humans win, right? We're at this moment with technology.
Hey, wait, that's inherent bias. Just kidding.
Sometimes it feels like
It's okay. We have a bot resource group for that.
Sometimes it feels like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? With all the brooms and the buckets going everywhere, that we're a little bit not necessarily in control. And that it's interesting. I mean, one of the statistics I dug up in the book is that almost 1 in 5 people have left a job to go to a job with a better technological experience. And that's unreal.
But not everybody can have that experience, or can we make sure that everybody has that experience? Because, I mean, we're starting to see, like, the jobs that are what we traditionally call not humane, right? Highly automated, highly repetitive, right? Those jobs will definitely go to machines. But will there be enough work for everyone else? Always is the fear. And then the other fear is your algorithmic management, which is actually happening. So let's go a little deeper into that, because I think that's going to be very interesting for folks to understand where you might see that future.
And I just saw a tweet yesterday of ChatGPT-4 listing the highest probability jobs that'll be displaced by machines, like accounting, proofreading. There was a lot. Some of them were what we would consider creative work that made the top 20 or 30 list. But it was interesting to see, like call center professionals or ranked at the top.
Or college application essay writers.
Yeah, or podcasters covering technology trends.
Slightly worrying. No, but I think part of what's interesting there is that, we've been on a long automation journey. Yep. Right. And as things have gotten automated away, we continually find new things for humans to do.
Yes.
But I think what's interesting, and the big pivot we're going to have to make in the workforce in the next few years probably, is that we are not necessarily great at selecting for, rewarding, and cultivating the skills that are going to be most paramount in a highly automated world. Right. So all of the sort of empathy, understanding, ability to truly listen and communicate, right? Not just generate text. Currently, organizations are really crummy at selecting for and promoting and rewarding those skills. So that, to me, is the kind of sharp right-hand turn we're going to have to make.
Yeah, for sure. Any advice to people success, human resource professionals that are watching the show, in terms of adapting to these new norms and being able to think like a human? When you advise your clients or you're advising transformation even within Mercer, what advice do you have, especially to maybe line of business leaders, chief marketing, chief information, folks that have budget responsibilities and also leading large organizations?
I would say 2 things. I think number 1, set some priorities. I vividly remember sitting with the leadership of a tech company, and one of the leaders was yelling at the CEO, "You can't have 37 priorities." And it wasn't a joke. They actually had 37 priorities, right? Wow. So set some dang priorities, right? Do a few things well. Yeah, but then also reconnect, even if it's a scary journey, reconnect the work to the outcomes. Because that's what's gone wrong, especially in modern knowledge work, is that there's activity, and we don't really connect it back to business results. So that's the journey. If I'm a business leader, make sure all those people doing all that work, make sure that work is going somewhere. It sounds so silly, but when you really kind of get under the hood, oftentimes that's what's not happening.
And do you do that with understanding the jobs to be done and the measurements associated to progress? Mm-hmm. Is it the methods and the measurements that give you alignment in terms of your work, to your team, to the line of business, to the company, to the ecosystem? How do you create that? How do you link the work to impact?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to kind of take the activities lens off, right? And that's where shutting up the anxiety monster is so important, right? Okay. So if you take kind of needing a certain level of activity out of the equation, right? Like my Outlook calendar doesn't have to be full. We don't need, take that activity view away. And then truly reverse engineer off of business results, which again, in most organizations has not been done in a very long time. Okay, if this is what we need to do, not, I need to hit these activities, which particularly in functional roles, like, a CMO, a CIO, right? It can get very activities driven. Pull it back to business results. And then don't be afraid to redesign the work in large and small ways. And sometimes it's like, again, being willing to tweak somebody's job on a week-to-week basis. Don't think of that job description as set in stone. The everyday stuff can be very powerful.
I like the reverse engineer. We had Jeff Bezos' chief of staff on our show, Colin Breyer, and we asked him about Amazon's work methodology and principles and outcome-driven culture. And he said, we work backwards. We identify from a customer all the way to what we need to do to achieve said outcome. And it was reverse, like you said, reverse engineering how you contribute as an individual to the outcome you would like to see that would hopefully delight your customers. Go ahead, Ray. Yeah, just
no. I was just saying, like, the 50 strategies for groups, the 50 strategies that you have for for teams. I mean, organizations. I think they're great. I mean, it's really just trying to find the right matrix for the right scenario, and I think it's really wonderful how you provided that. So thank you very much. So,
thank you. It was fun stuff.
Congratulations on the book.
And congratulations on the book. Yeah. So we're here with Melissa Swift, author of Work Here Now. You can follow her at MESWIFT and get her book on Amazon, published by Wiley, and of course, something from Mercer and the Mercer Thought Leadership team over there. So thanks a lot and happy Friday. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you. Happy Friday. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you. We have so many great authors that come on the show. I'm still waiting for Reed's book, but okay. Our final guest, one of the most prolific writers we ever have on our show. So someone's got to just nudge him to write a book. Jon Reed, co-founder of Diginomica, is our guest. Diginomica is a media analyst property designed to serve the interest of the enterprise leader in the digital era. Launched in 2013. Diginomica consists of a team of writers and analysts based in the US, Europe, who share decades of experience on enterprise business computing. Now, Jon himself began building enterprise communities only 1 year after the World Wide Web was founded. So he's been a lot. For those historians, that's 1994. He's a weekly columnist, analyst, and enterprise and startup advisor. He's Ray and I's favorite guest. In fact, he's a first ballot Hall of Fame inductee in the DisrupTV as soon as he retires. You can follow Jon on Twitter at JONERP. Welcome back, Jon, to DisrupTV.
Thanks, guys. Ray's probably glad we're doing this virtually so I can't spill coffee on him like I did a couple days ago.
I wish you had a video of that.
Yeah.
All good. Don't even worry about it. Don't even remember. I only remember that when you tell me. So,
hey, remember the last guest we were talking about sleep deprivation and like work? We're about to find out what happens when a guest that comes on strong is sleep deprived from West Coast travel. What happens to the show? So let's find out.
All right, let's do this.
What do you want to talk about?
Where do you want to go here? I mean, we've got bank failures, right? And you've been looking at this. I mean, what's the impact of tech companies? Like, what do you see that happening? So
yeah, let me talk about this for a sec but before I do, I just want to say there's a little bit of an irony in asking me about financial markets and tech, because no one knows more about that in our industry than our host, Ray. Yep. So read his blogs. His global market analysis is about as good as you're going to get from people on the enterprise side of things. So putting that disclaimer aside, I do have a few takeaways, and I'd love to hear what you guys think of this, because I want to sort of give you some big picture thoughts on this. The first is that I've noticed this whole frenzy around the blame game for why this bank went down. And I think it's a complex thing. There's a lot of different factors, but I've been very, very frustrated and embarrassed by the hijacking of this whole thing for political purposes. I mean, just to give you an example, if Ray and I were arguing about this, I would probably put more blame on selfish, greedy venture capitalists that sabotage their own bank, whereas Ray probably would put more blame on regulators and interest rates and things like that. The good thing about Ray and I is we would have a really nice conversation about that, but we're never going to agree, and it's never going to solve the problem. And so I found it really disturbing that people were happy perhaps to see something fail in order to prove a point one way or the other. And I think the really big lesson and why that's so dangerous is because the lesson here is that we're all connected. We're all networked financially. One thing goes down, the ripple effects affect everything. And that's the big lesson from this. And, even when you look at like Credit Suisse, for example, Russia, China, Middle East, all those areas have an impact on a bank, right? And so we have to figure that out, and we need people who are about solutions, not about placing blame and political maneuverings. That's one thing. The second, of course, is that the system is a little more fragile, maybe a lot more fragile than we thought.
A lot more fragile, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a really huge point, and I don't think we're at the edge of the abyss, but I think we got a couple looks down the abyss the last couple of weeks. And what I would say to that is that if we go down, we're not coming back up. This is not like 2008 financial crisis. If this system goes down, I don't want to think about what would happen next. So we need to come up with smarter ways of doing this going forward. And, I was reading about, for example, this Brex CEO who is fundraising more than $1 billion in loans for startups. This was before everything got resolved, but the point was like, let's get in the fray and find, bridges for these people so that the worst case scenarios for people don't happen. But like, that was the kind of thing that really inspired me. Like, let's get into the fray and try to like come up with better approaches and better systems. So to me, that's like a really big thing, is finding solutions that work. And so, will this affect the next wave of innovation? I think that's really one of the other really important points we have to think about. But we really don't want to fall back on like, oh, let's have a few huge multinational super banks so that we can avoid these problems. That's really also a very bad case scenario of creating a few too big to fail banks. We need smaller banks, innovative banks. We need banks that can lend out micropayments to developing countries and communities. And so I think this idea of like, oh, let's take shelter, but now we're feeling really good about putting all our money in this huge monster bank. That's not the right approach either. So those are my big takeaways. What do you think?
I completely agree on the facts that too big to fail banks are going to be too big. Their business is not lending to communities, right? You have a small bank in the Midwest that knows manufacturing and agriculture, right? They know exactly what to look for and how to support those communities. You have banks that are on handling biotech. They work very differently than the ones that handle like high tech, right? And I think there are specialty banks and credit unions that are very important. They play an important role. Do we need 1,000 community banks? Maybe not. Do we need like 500? Definitely so, right? And I think we're going to see that. As for your point on where we agree or where we don't agree, I think we agree we need a solution, right? I think that's a very, very important piece, right? I mean, if you look at the bank board for Silicon Valley Bank, none of those people on the board ever had any financial banking experience. I mean, that's a huge issue. The regulators at the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco, like sent warning signs, but didn't really do anything because the CEO was on the board as well. Right. So there's a lot of intermingling. And, if this was a bank sitting in the Midwest that went under, they wouldn't have had the same political clout to call their, congressional offices to say, come save us. Right. So there's so many factors here, which is pretty incredible.
The counterpoint in that is what Jon included in his article referencing Dave Kellogg, who's an entrepreneur, knows startup communities. And Dave said these banks weren't sitting on the top of a pile of incredibly complex, thinly traded derivatives like CDOs or CDO swaps. They were sitting on top of a pile of long government bonds. This isn't 2008. This is not Lehman Brothers. This is something new. So,
which gets to my point about the fragility of the system, right? We can't say this was just an FTX type of thing where nothing was backed, but where it was all like phantom stuff. Like this is real currency backed, and we still ran into this problem. And I think we have to treat that as a huge wake up call that we need to have better solutions to this. And one other point that gets a little closer, and I want to get to generative AI because I got a lot of content for you on that. But one other point there is around that Silicon Valley Bank, I'm not a huge venture capital person myself in certain ways, but I do have to recognize that was the heart of the tech startup community. And those of us who care about innovation in the enterprise and beyond need to recognize that this wasn't just a bank failure. This was the failure of a network that supported a lot of people. And so there has, I believe, been damage done to that network. And those of us who care about innovation need to figure out what to do about that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
anyway.
absolutely. And
The VCs provided.
don't discount the bank run. I mean, everyone now has a supercomputer in their pocket. You've created a frictionless banking engagement model where a couple of buttons and I'm pulling out or putting in. This couldn't happen in 2008.
Indeed.
You know,
What's-
so technology has made it so that, you know, in a Friday afternoon, a tweet from a prominent so-and-so, and you could create
bank
movement
run.
like anything you've ever seen.
It's a social media bank run. But the thing is, we also have a very low trust of institutions coming out of the pandemic, massive low trust on institutions. And, you know, but this is really the Fed rate hike. I mean, if we look a year ago, the Fed rate was 0. I mean, we went 4.5, almost 5 points, right? This is ridiculous, right? So this is some of the impact. And I will counter the argument here that most of the banks were smart enough not to buy long-term securities when interest rates are rising. These guys were not doing their job. You just do not do that. And in a normal situation, what you would do, and this is going to sound really bad to folks, is you would let the bank fail as a lesson instead of create this moral hazard that the U.S. government's going to continue to bail them out. Now, on your point on innovation, that would suck. But the VCs are still funding companies. The VCs are still funding the businesses, but it's the bank that provides the operating capital. And I think that's the important thing to understand, that you don't have that operating capital available. Like Chase isn't going to do it, right? The too big to bank fails banks aren't going to do it because that's just not their job and they're not good at it and they get yield from something else.
Yeah,
that's the scary part.
Before we go to generative AI, my final thought on this is just that we can no longer view this as something that specialists handle. We all need to embrace a bit of responsibility for understanding these problems, not just where we put our money, but where our friends put their money, and where we invest and how we support institutions and how we support local and regional banks instead of turning our backs on them. Anyway.
But there's room to create a
Ray
bank
has
right now.
Money in 12 banks. Now I know.
I do have my money in 12 banks, actually.
And Ray,
I really do, actually.
And Ray, please don't tweet when you pull it out, okay? Because
No.
Okay.
But
big hype around generative AI. Is it big hype?
Hype or not?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. You know, I was realizing that I take generative AI really, really personally, and I was trying to think about why I have such a big chip on my shoulder about it, and I realized there's 2 reasons. One is that like I've been a creator all my life, and like 15 years ago, I knew someone who fell out of my life professionally, and she checked my LinkedIn profile. She was like, "Oh my God, your career, that's amazing what you've done." And I was thinking like, well, because 15 years ago I had a much more conventional enterprise career, and I met some people who were doing things differently, people like you, Ray, and I was like, I'm jumping into the deep end here. And I've had a really unconventional and rewarding career. And I think the 2 of you I think of as well, like Ray, this phenomenon is, there's a whiteboard phenomenon to creativity where you take everything you've learned and you clear it and you create a whiteboard and you say, this is my dream. And Ray, you did that with Constellation. Yeah. And Vala, you've invented a career unlike any other that I can think of. And that's a creative process that I believe is sacred, that I want every individual to undertake and to embrace. And I think these tools threaten that a little bit in the sense that people think, oh, ChatGPT, I built a website with this technology. I did. Okay, you did, but you didn't build a good website, okay? No, yeah. And how many bad websites on the internet do we have right now? Like, do we need thousands more bad websites? No, we don't. Now, that doesn't mean this technology isn't like important, and I'm going to get into why it is. But that's, I think, one reason why it bothers me. And the second reason that there's so many misconceptions right now about the limitations of the technology. And so I've become a bit of an AI geek trying to undermine like some of the misconceptions that are being promoted. But you want to know what's really interesting is that, you know how the enterprise got totally exposed a lot of times by being slow and sluggish, like, for example, with the iPhone and the user experience of mobile. And it was like, why is the enterprise so crappy on user experience and tech? Well, I think generative AI is the enterprise's moment to provide some leadership around what actually works with this technology. Because as it turns out, when you do this stuff on the open internet, it's a garbage in, garbage out phenomenon. And what's fascinating about enterprise use cases that are emerging now is that there's much more of a focus on limiting the data to more specialized data sets for very specific purposes, and actually advancing this whole conversation and dealing with some of the limitations that we're seeing with some of the like hallucinations and bizarre stuff that's gone on with like the open internet version of this. So I think it's a really interesting chance for the enterprise, ironically enough, to take the lead on this. And so so the short version is ChatGPT overhyped? I would say it's not a business revolution, it's a business evolution, and that's a really, really important distinction because AI has kind of been in the business for a while. But I will say this, I think it is a cultural revolution. And I think that is why it's having such a big impact, is because this is a little bit of an iPhone moment for AI in a broad sense. It's not as universally adopted as the iPhone was, but it's a little bit of that moment where the average person is having this light bulb of like, I could write my college essay with this. I could write a letter to a collector who's breathing down my back with this. I could maybe write a living will with this. And I think that is, give OpenAI a lot of credit for like not necessarily having the most advanced technology period, but putting it out there in a very accessible way. And I will say, and this is not an attack on your views, Ray, but I will say what's interesting is how this has also exposed the folks that decided, like the Zuckerberg and Accentures that I've been criticizing for deciding that metaverse, Web3, tokens, blockchain, that whole thing was the next big thing. There's a big lesson here because Zuckerberg's getting on the AI generative train now and backpedaling on metaverse. Why? Because adoption is what dictates what the next big thing is, folks.
That's John, tweet that.
That's what
adoption is what dictates what the next big thing is. That is super profound. And I'll tell you, I'm at Border Cafe restaurant with my son. He's 12 last night. And he says, I had trouble understanding my math homework. So, Dad, this is unsolicited. Dad, I went to this site called OpenAI and I typed the equation. And what I liked is it explained to me how the math works. So then I went and typed my social studies essay assignment, and it gave me great logic, great insights. So I'm like, well, what do you think about it? He's like, Dad, it's like a calculator for writing. And I'm like, wow. He equated the text prompt as a calculator for writing. And I thought, if a 12-year-old, without Dad pointing him to the site, I've always told him to go to Khan Academy for math and learning, but I didn't ask him to go for ChatGPT. But I'm like, my God, a 12-year-old on his own understands and appreciates and has adopted this virtual tutor and described it in language that only a 12-year-old, but it made sense to me.
So Vala, you should blow his mind now. It show him the prompt marketplace. It gets even better. You have a library for the calculator. It gives you all the prompts. I'm not sure if
I love the fact, but I praise them up and down for using it. My wife was like, hey, listen, I don't want him to have tools to help him write. Because both my wife and I believe that you read to improve your writing, you write to improve your thinking. So if you take shortcuts with writing, you're taking shortcuts in how you think. But I love the fact that he's using it. It's such a catch-22. I don't, but it's a sign, like you said, adoption defines the next big thing.
Right.
The 12-year-olds are going to be messing around in tokenized ledger.
There'll be prompt libraries.
Absolutely. Now, for the enterprise angle, we won't have time to get into all the use cases today because I know we're just about to run out of time here. But what I do want to point out is that what's going on in the enterprise is fascinating because they're grappling with the fact that this technology is going to reach some limits in terms of scaling and parameters. And the long story short is that what the enterprise is doing is trying to make better use of it by not scaling higher and higher, but putting in guardrails, using so-called iterative AI, which allows the users to continually improve the data training, which doesn't occur right now with ChatGPT, by the way. And a big part is injecting company-specific data, also grappling with explainability, which Workday spent a lot of time on this week in their AI ML Summit, saying we're going to explain to users what you're seeing, where the sources came from. You should have come to our
developer summit. You should have come to our summit.
There you go. And we sent someone else there who wrote about it, but that's another topic. And and so what's really interesting is all the use cases that emerge from that from an enterprise perspective, and it's everything from things like helping people do. ChatGPT is really great at like summarizing things. So it's like if you give it 5,000 job descriptions and say, make my best job description for like a DevOps manager, boom, it's going to give you a really good one. You're going to get a great head start. So it's really great at that kind of stuff. Of course, there's all kinds of medical things that are really powerful when you think about feeding all this really good, not garbage information from the internet, but awesome medical information into one place and then allowing it to generate diagnostic materials. But the key thing to remember is the reason it's an evolution and not a revolution is because humans are going to have to remain in the loop to keep this on track. But the good part about not being a revolution is it buys us all time we're going to need to plan for the implications of this technology on jobs, talent, automation, everything else. So I have to stop there.
John, you have described a unicorn startup because given the volume, veracity, and this just sheer amount of new content that's being generated, this data-driven hyper-automation to test and vet the output is an entire class of, so generative AI QA platform. So, and the scale has to be machine to machine level because it's just too much for humans to sequentially look at the output and decide whether this is going to be something we're going to publish on our website or we're going to share in an email template in sales, or how we're going to, it's going to replace a knowledge-based article in service. An entire platform that actually filters and improves the signal to noise ratio. Those are companies that are going to be booming as a result of this. This is amazing. It's amazing.
It is.
Yeah. No, we're definitely seeing a brand new era here. I think it's really interesting to see what the implications are.
We need to have more than a 20-minute segment with John.
Yeah.
That's another takeaway.
So that's a whole other takeaway. So, but hey, here with awesome Jon Reed, co-founder of Diginomica. More importantly, you can follow at Jon ERP and Reed Diginomica. If you want to know what the heck is happening in the enterprise, it's probably the most comprehensive media outlet in terms of enterprise tech. So thanks a lot, John.
First ballot Hall of Fame inductee. First ballot.
Thanks, Alice. Catch you next time.
Thanks, John.
It's just you and me. What's going on?
He's so good. All the guests were amazing, but it's great to think about. We started with a CEO of a company that's using AI platform for matching the best fit in terms of candidates, and an incredible new author talking about thinking like people. Isn't it amazing with all this technology? The secret sauce is to humanize how we work and how we produce products and services. And of course, John, who's amazing. Your final thoughts on our three extraordinary guests.
Yeah, I think, despite all this talk about generative AI and machine learning and where we're headed with automation and robotics, the human factor is still very important. We have something about 4 million workers exit the workforce. That's why we are having such a hard time finding people, right? It's not because it's a booming economy. It's because we have a declining population market and people have just chosen to leave the workforce. This is the same thing that happened pre-pandemic. At 2019, we were still short on workers. And I think we're going to continue to see this for quite some time. Two trends will happen. One is we're going to see the advancement of automation. You already see that today in small ways. You get to a McDonald's and you order by kiosk. You come through the drive-through, it's probably a contact center that's offshored, right? Or it might be ChatGPT in the future, just translating your orders to text, your voice to text into orders into the order entry machine. So you're going to see more and more of that acceleration across the board. But that means the people that are left that are working, we're going to have to figure out different ways to motivate them, different ways to take care of them. And that's really what Anne and Melissa were both talking about. Melissa's was actually pretty interesting in the fact that in her new book, what we're seeing is really, a lot of this is our state of mental health, our mental well-being, how we view things, right, dictates a lot about our performance. And if you can actually figure that out, then we can actually figure out how to work here in the present and do a good job. But, John has it right. Generative AI is brand new. It's going to change things. AI has been around for so many times. We've had many winters, many false starts. This one's interesting. I think the reality is we're going to determine that we do not have enough data to make precise decisions. A lot of this is going to require training and augmentation for it to get to a level of comfort that we'll be able to work side by side with machines. So back to you, Vala.
I'm just hoping you don't replace me with a
No, we will end up replacing ourselves because some chatbot, some AI, some general AI is going to come and say, "Oh yeah, this show's kind of interesting. Maybe we'll just replace them with different names and
or maybe
people that look like this."
Maybe we'll have a chatbot as a guest at some point, and we can just
I might be able to arrange that.
Prompt questions and see the answers.
Well, hey,
next week we have an incredible show, futurists and authors. We have Kathy Hackle, futurist author of The Augmented Workplace. We have Caitlin McGregor, CEO of Plum. And we have Heather McGowan, author of Empathy Advantage. 3 extraordinary people next Friday. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Happy Friday.